Hey guys, welcome back to more relationship stories. In this video, my wife cheated with my brother, we broke up, and then she called me 3 years later. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is a petty revenge story. I want to mention that my wife is an amazing person. I got laid off 18 months ago and she stepped up and traded roles with me. She has become the provider of this house and, let's be honest, still does more to keep the house in order than I do. I basically keep the kid alive, that's my function. Anyway, she is a saint. She does, however, have a few idiosyncrasies that really bug me. Namely, chewing with her mouth open and open mouth, tongue out, no cover, coughing wherever she is. So one day I'm cooking dinner and she's standing on the other side of the island, reading the news on her phone, and she starts coughing routine on the food I am prepping for dinner. I'm having a tough day, so I cannot say any more, and I say something, could you please not cough on the dinner, or something like that. She's got to be at work for a 12-hour night shift at an animal emergency clinic, so she's not having it either, and starts yelling at me about how her parents were not around to teach her better. I add insult to injury by saying it's just like chewing with your mouth open, you're 43, you can unlearn it. She is now super mad, so she yells, well, it's just like you farting. You can control that and it's disgusting. This is the first time she has mentioned this in our 5 years together, so I did not know. So now I know that I do something that bugs her, I cannot in good faith continue to do it, despite her lack of work on chewing or coughing. My petty revenge? I high-five the 2-year-old every time she farts and we laugh when mom is asleep for work, so every time mom has a day off, the baby will run over to her, fart, laugh and run away. I would say that's appropriate petty revenge. And now let's move on to the slightly more serious, I would say, titled story, which is also from r/relationships. It is titled, My Wife Cheated with My Brother and She Called Me 3 years later. I wanna start this story off by acknowledging that I did not have the healthiest view of what marriage was when I was younger. My parents had a marriage that somehow survived my brother's early childhood, but just a few years afterwards I was born and trouble started. We were fairly close in age. From all that I've heard and seen over the years, their marriage had always been a bit tense. It was not until I was born that all that stress finally burst, and I was barely a year old when the divorce happened. It was explosive. My father did not want any custody, not surprising considering that having kids was a large source of his discontent, and vanished shortly after the divorce. If it were not for regular child support payments, then we might not have known that he was still alive. My mother seemed to believe that slapping a title on a relationship was all-empowering. She believed that having married my father had given her value in life. This meant that she needed to find someone to blame because her value in life had just been deconstructed. Unsurprisingly, I was that someone. So apparently me being born was the last straw in their crappy marriage. My brother as a result received every bit of coddling a child could, just so mother could rub it in my face that I got nothing. My mother was a deadbeat, and honestly I have no clue how we got money to make it through many of my younger years. She would receive the child support from my father and immediately spend it all on spoiling my brother. While I was resigned to hand-me-downs and things I could scrounge from my friends' parents that seemed to pity me. Middle school came along and I had made friends with another boy whose family situation was dysfunctional too. This friendship is mostly important because of his sister, who was a year younger. We met through him and instantly became close friends. We had plenty of interests in common and would always comfort each other about our effed up family situations. Something I couldn't ever do with brother because he was emotionally constipated like most middle school boys. All through middle school, me and her, I will call her Lexi for ease, were very good friends. By junior high we were dating, but we were not at the same school building and neither of us had good relationships with our family, so of course we kept it on the down low. When my second year of high school came around and Lexi came to the same building, we made it official. By the time we started dating, her family situation had gone catastrophic. It was to the point that she did not want to sleep at home most nights to avoid a potential tantrum from her mother, who was deeply alcoholic at this point. My mother, being oh so virtuous, did not allow us in my room together, but did let Lexi sleep on the couch whenever she wanted. Of course, there were plenty of nights where me and Lexi stayed up late in my bedroom, but as long as mother did the bare minimum to see like a parent to me, she just focused on my brother. I think these nights are probably where the issue started, and I by no means think that it was my brother alone who had the initial idea. After all, this was the one time my brother allowed me to keep anything in my life that brought me joy. I should have been more suspicious. I worked part-time through high school, and when I graduated I dove into a full-time job plus keeping up a part-time one. I did not have my diploma for a month before I was in my own apartment away from my family. Lexi lived with me for the last year of her high school. I had no aspirations for myself, but I wanted Lexi to be able to have a better future than me. Right out of high school I popped the question. She said yes, and we hopped over to a chapel with a few friends to elope. This is the biggest mistake I believe that I made in the whole situation, but when you live your whole life having it shoved down your throat that marriage is all that provides value to anyone, then you might have a skewed image of it. And yes, it was true love as far as I was concerned. Lexi started out at community college, so we both could work and build up the savings a bit more. With some classes out of the way and savings, we had it all calculated so Lexi could get through her degree on just my income. Now, we lived near a big city, and she was going to that city's community college. I wanted to immediately move into the city because we lived in a small suburb with one grocery store and very little to do. It was going to be hard to avoid contact with either of our families. I let myself be convinced that we should stay and have her go to the CC location in the suburb. She had all these reasons ready the instant I asked. It was easier financially, we still had friends here, etc., so I let myself be convinced. 2 years later, Lexi is ready for university, and she chooses the university that is in the city we both grew up near. She does buck against moving into the city supposedly because of the higher rent. This time I insist and she resigns herself to it. It was near impossible to notice with all the work I was doing during her time at CC, but some oddities did become apparent once university started. She was gone for huge stretches of time, which I allowed myself to be convinced was because of her focus on her studies. She even crashed at a college friend's place quite often, and so I might not see her for a few days at a time. It was all for our future though, it would surely be just fine. I tucked away my misgivings, and Lexi was near to finishing her degree entirely on my dime. I was just happy I could make myself valuable to the woman I loved. This was all for our future to be great, and then she got pregnant. Sex had been irregular with both of our full schedules, but one thing that was incredibly regular was the fact that I was never silly and always wrapped my willy. She had not tested herself yet. By the time I acted on my suspicions, I knew everything Google had to teach me about early pregnancy signs. So I took a couple vacation days at work and followed my wife around as subtly as I could manage. I did not have to worry about my amateur sleuth skills because she was oblivious to the world around her. She did go to classes that first day and then spent some time studying with friends. But when those friends went off and invited her to come with for a party, she declined. I received a text shortly after saying that she was staying with her friends overnight. Then I got to follow her all the way back to our little suburb and to my mother's door. My mother even greeted her at the door. I waited until the lights in my mother's bedroom went off for the night to investigate. They had changed the locks since I left, but I knew them too well and found my way to the spare key near the back door. I walked in on my brother and Lexi in the act of it, and to this day, just calling that image to my mind hurts me deeply. My mother was happy enough to tell me when it all started when I asked. She rubbed it in my face that Lexi had been practically groomed by my brother, and they had been together off and on since before me and Lexi were married. I expect as much of a betrayal from my brother and my mother, but I couldn't believe it from Lexi. My brother laughed at me and thanked me that I had saved him all that work to put Lexi through school, and now she could make the big bucks and I was not needed anymore anyway. Lexi looked scared. I don't think she had ever seen me angry as I was that day, and I think my family's taunting towards me reminded her of why we had become close in the first place. Still, I stayed in town only long enough to finalize the divorce and finally fulfilled my dream of moving away from my family and doing my best to forget that they ever existed. I changed my number, ditched all my old emails, and deleted the few social media accounts I did have. I moved states away and left that life in the past. I started putting myself through CC courses, but I was moving slowly because I was also focused on moving up in banking, which is where my experience was. I met a woman in one of my courses and I remember being immediately struck by her. I didn't want to get anywhere near that tangle of emotions again though, so I ignored any of those first impressions. She didn't though. I don't know what she saw in me, but she didn't let me hide or run away. She was not coming after me romantically at first either, she just started out curious. She wanted to become my friend and learn more about my journey. When she kept showing up and sticking around, I eventually let my guard down far enough to accept her as a friend. And when she kept trying to figure out my past, I eventually let my guard down even further and told her all about me. There were a lot of nights filled with sobbing, ending with crying myself to sleep. A lot of talks with her ended with me trying to hurt her as opposed to letting her in my life. Still, she stuck by me and eventually wore me down to the point where I agreed to go to therapy, if only to shut her up. It took another year before I let her in my life enough to admit that I wanted to be with her romantically. Even as I write this, I'm not quite ready to marry again yet. We live together and I don't see anything breaking us apart, but there's a lot of baggage there and she has not pushed me to do anything I'm not completely comfortable with yet. All this is to say that I truly found the fresh start in life I was looking for. Up until the phone call came. I am used to spam calls, but I'll admit I was interested in this one having the area code of my hometown. I picked up and said hello. My blood was ice in my veins when I heard Lexi on the other end of the line. I instantly hung up and it wasn't long before more calls started to flood in from my brother and my mother and other members of my dysfunctional family. I blocked each and every one of them except for Lexi. Shortly after the initial call, she had called again and left a long voicemail. I could not bring myself to block her and have listened to the message enough that it haunts my thoughts. Lexi talks about how we were when we first met and what I meant to her, how she had never meant to hurt me and got carried away in a situation she didn't fully understand. She talked about her daughter and how she wished she had me as a father instead of my brother. She talked about how she was getting a divorce with my brother after he had proven himself as a deadbeat. Or deadbeat, I always pronounce that wrong. Anyway, finally she said that she wanted to give us a try again. Before any of you get too concerned, I immediately showed all this to my girlfriend and it never even crossed my mind as a possibility to end things with her for this bomb from my past. I was extremely emotionally distraught. I felt that I had to reply to Lexi and I could not let all this fester or turn into something worse with her maybe coming to try and even find me. The idea of replying to this voicemail is digging up all of my trauma though. I don't know why I'm typing this all out here. I've compiled and trashed probably 40 different messages to Lexi and I just needed to put something out into the world about all this. My girlfriend has been incredibly patient and encouraging and is just further proving why I will always cherish her. Her stubbornness saved me, and her loyalty is what will get me through this resurgence of trauma. Update: I really appreciate all of you guys have said in the comments. I was scared to look at the comments first, but my girlfriend came in and read them and thought that I would get encouragement from them. I really have, so I will thank you guys. I did send the reply and figured you guys all deserved an update. I basically told her, Lexi, I'm happy to hear that you have ended things with my brother. I've never hidden anything from you, so I won't hide that your betrayal was one of the most destructive events in my adult life. I've managed to recover, but you never even attempted to be there for me. You just used me. That is more than enough in my mind to say that I absolutely cannot revisit our relationship. However, I have somehow found someone who has been more in my life than you were for years before everything ended. You cannot ever be in my life again. I'll be changing my number, don't try to contact me again, and never try to find me. Good luck. Update number 2. Since I have approached this comment section for emotional encouragement every once in a while, I figured I should let you guys know one more thing. I've been working on this in therapy and long talks with my partner. I finally decided to do it. I proposed and I'll be getting married in a couple months. It will still be a small intimate ceremony with mostly just her family, but it's a big step forward into the future. I am having the life I dreamt of having since I learned that I didn't have to stay with my horrible family anymore. And here, ripe stars, I'm happy for OP that things turned positive in the end for him. I really hope that he will never get contacted by his family and especially Lexi or his brother again, and props to him for going no contact and leaving all of that toxic stuff behind. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Neighbor antagonized me all year, so I quite literally gave him a taste of his own medicine. In college, I had a neighbor who will henceforth be Benny, like that asshat from New Vegas, and this neighbor, he was not a considerate neighbor. For example, he watched TikTok at 3 AM and connected to his Bluetooth speaker, which he so politely pointed directly at the wall to improve sound quality. He piled his garbage in front of my door when it didn't fit on the sides of his door that I had to cut a path out when I wanted to leave. He dumped piss from a bottle under my door when he thought I reported him for one of his many crimes against the people of the floor. An absolute degenerate of a neighbor. I was, however, fairly friendly with one of his roommates, and on one crisp November evening, this roommate let me in on a little social experiment he was conducting. In Benny's closet in a black garbage bag was a pumpkin from Halloween. Originally it was just supposed to smell up the closet until Benny found it, but Benny never did find it. Move out day was in late December. I was packing up in my room and my roommate comes back and says, "Hey, what's up with the bag of soup outside?" After some initial confusion, we discover that this fine bag of moldy, wet, desecrated remains is from the pumpkin. We decided that the best course of action for this beloved sack of soup was placed caringly and carefully in front of Benny's door, since he must have misplaced it. Benny was not fond of this development. He knocked on my door, banging like the headboard of a wedding bed, and demanded to know why I had put my garbage in front of his door. So I reminded him that it was actually his garbage. In fact, it was actually his compost at that point. Obviously, he apologized for the misunderstanding, took out his own garbage and left me alone. And we both went our separate ways, since we only needed to tolerate each other for a few hours. But no, actually, believe it or not, he balled it up and threw it at my head. The only logical choice really. This angry water balloon sailed through the sky, through my door and into my bed frame. I readied a nearby jar of salsa for the coming battle, but he had already turned tail and waddled back to his room as quickly as his enormous girth would allow. Now that the history is set, it is time for the revenge part you have all been waiting for. I went over to the pumpkin, which luckily was still contained in its fine plastic vessel, so I crept ever so slowly towards Benny's room, pumpkin bag in hand, shot put style. When Benny opened the door, we made brief eye contact. I saw him, he saw me, he saw Excalibur in my hand, and in that moment he knew his fate. And as he moved to close the door, I loosed the pumpkin on its most holy journey. I can say that I understand how Olympians feel when they break a record with a Herculean act of strength as the pumpkin sailed through the door into the side of Benny's chair and exploded as furiously as one might atop a toilet on Taco Tuesday. The black fireball, the stench, everywhere, all over everything. The ceiling, the floor, his clothes, his heater, him, everything. Like the morning after a fresh snowfall, if that snow was black as night and smelled of rotting fruit. And the best part? His roommates and everything he owned was shielded by what I can only explain as angels sent to protect him from my righteous wrath. And the next one is titled, My Upstairs Neighbors, My Almost 1 Year Ordeal. I'm sorry if this is lengthy, but it has been an absolute nightmare that is ongoing. My neighbors moved in last year in October. He seemed alright as I thought he would be living alone. After coming by day, playing music as loud as he could and going up telling him we could hear it, I thought it would stop. But it didn't. He also moved in with his girlfriend and their 2-year-old child who just loves to run indoors and no one stops him. Because we live in a condominium complex, a certain percentage of the floor is to be carpeted to minimize noise to downstairs tenants or owners. Their floor is not, they walk heavy, they play music loud, and of course their kid jumps so hard that it shakes the lights in my ceiling. I have approached the management and they pretty much don't care. I have evidence as late as March that they don't have a carpet. I went up on March 29th while WFH because NJ had a stay-at-home order and asked, can you please turn the music and don't have your kid running around. I told him I work from home and his response was, I work too, and that he cannot control his child. He cursed me out, but the music stopped for 2 days but went right back again after that. Later that evening, me and my wife went to the store and 2 strange men were at our door. When they see us, they were on the phone and they ran. We called the cops and nothing was done. Then they flooded my kitchen from upstairs and claim it was a small pot. I needed a new kitchen floor, ceiling and new carpeting in my entire condominium. I had to work out of the hotel during the pandemic for a week for my ceiling to dry. I lost my job because of the noise. They still live here after destroying my property and costing my job. Even spoke to the landlord and still nothing. I have collected evidence and recordings, have kept records and recordings of their nasty conversations with us and others. My wife has an autoimmune disease which requires rest when she is not working. We have owned this place for 12 years. I'm not just going to move because the neighbors said I should and that we have no life. My life has been seriously impacted by this. I have spiraled into a wicked depression. It seems like no one has answers to help me. The noise is consistent. They have no remorse or care in the world, just looking for answers on how to approach this. P.S. We are suing the landlord, but because civil court is not open yet, it has been tough. Any answers are appreciated. And guys, if you were in this situation, what would you suggest OP to do? Let us know in the comments. And the next one is titled, They Are Being Evicted, and it is an update to the previous story. Like 2 months ago, I put up a post about my inconsiderate upstairs neighbors who let their kid run around all day while blaring music as me and my wife work. After asking the gentleman to stop and telling him I don't leave the house much due to compromised immune system, basically told to F off and move even though I own the condo. Well, October 11th, they were sent correspondence that they have 30 days to leave and any other noise complaints will be incurred as fines towards tenants and landlord. The landlord also having issues with the HOA because he never laid down carpet and caused damage to the ceiling in my house because of their child jumping. Now I can eat dinner with my wife in peace, I can reclaim my lazy weekends, I can finally get another cat since I had to give my cat away because of the noise. Hopefully this uplifts someone in my similar situation and that things will work out for you. And the next one is titled, Complaining Neighbor. Many moons ago I lived on the 2nd floor of an apartment building in a college town, aka lots of young people getting their first taste of the real world. My neighbor below me came to my door one day asking me to keep the noise down. I was confused since I am a rather quiet person until she explained that the noise was from me walking around my apartment. She did not appreciate how loudly I walked in my own home. Side note, all the apartments had wall-to-wall carpets except for the 1st floor. I remembered something my uncle once told me about how if you don't want to hear people walking above you, then you need to live on the top floor. I told her that if it bothered her, she shouldn't have chosen to live on the 1st floor. She said that she had trouble with stairs and could not do that, but then told me to be quieter when walking around. I then told her politely that I would work on that and shut the door. I was not going to alter how I walked in my own apartment just for her and her attitude problem. Oddly enough though, shortly after this encounter I broke my foot walking down the stairs. I would be on crutches for 6 weeks with a cast and then have a walking cast for several weeks more after that. This made it difficult to move around my apartment since my crutches would get caught in the carpet. I found that it was easier to sit in my desk chair and push myself around my small apartment with my still functioning foot and arms. However, again, the problem here is the damn carpet. The wheels would get stuck in the carpet and would cause me the occasional problem. This would then mean I would have to hop around my apartment if I couldn't get the chair unstuck from the 1st floor. I could hear her complaining sometimes, especially when I had my balcony door open and she was outside. I honestly didn't care about her petty problems, but was tired of hearing them. Then one day I was trying to push myself across the apartment to the kitchen and the wheels got stuck. I had just given the chair a big push right as it got caught and promptly fell out of the chair and onto the floor. I did not land gracefully and ended up with a huge bruise on the back of my leg from standing on the armrest of the chair. Needless to say, I was not in a good mood and I was in pain. My lovely neighbor comes upstairs not too long after this and complains that I woke her from her nap with that loud bang. I had answered the door sitting in the evil chair with my broken foot in plain view. I politely told her that the loud bang she heard was my body hitting the floor. In my best sugary sweet sarcastic voice, I told her that I appreciated her concern for my well-being and that I was fine.
I then thanked her for coming by to check on me and then slammed the door in her face. She never bothered me again. And the last one is titled...
And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.